What's up, everybody? We are back with another review. Today we are talking Doom: The Dark Ages. I literally just finished it hours before recording this, so a lot of my thoughts are fresh, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. Now, I did not play any Doom ever until last month, where I played Doom 2016. I played Doom Eternal. At the time of recording this, I still have to play the DLCs for Doom Eternal. Make sure you follow Twitch, because this will be literally the day this is uploaded. I'm be live, probably playing while this is being uploaded or shortly after. So make sure you check out the Twitch link down below if you want to watch me play the Eternal DLCs. But like I said, Doom is new to me. But I just played Doom 2016. I just played Doom Eternal in the last few weeks, and so my comparison opinion is probably more fresh than anybody who's not a Doom hardcore fan. But so you had Doom 2016, moved pretty slow, had was like a current version of, from what at least I understand, how the old games were, but like modernized, not just in graphics, but just kind of the way the game plays and feels. And so that was like the modern version of old Doom, and then Doom Eternal was a more crazy movement-based Doom, which I actually really enjoyed. If I had to rank the Dooms, I'd probably put Eternal first. We'll talk about Dark Ages as we talk about it, but I'll probably put Eternal first just because I like the freedom of movement and all the different ways to move around the map. But from a gameplay standpoint, I wouldn't say it's first. We can talk about that as we review. But then you come into Doom: The Dark Ages, where it slows down the movement again. Now there is sprint in this, and you can turn on auto sprint, so you're just sprinting all the time, which is what I did. And it feels more fast paced that way. The non-sprint is very slow, and you feel the non-sprint slowness whenever you have to swim. The swimming is incredibly slow in this game. But it goes back to a lot less movement than Eternal and more platformy. Not as platformy as 2016, but platformy still. And so that's kind of the gameplay differences. The other big difference here is there's a lot of focus on close combat and melee. Besides the shotgun, the first gun you get is the version of the assault rifle for this game. And then you get a gun, the Shredder, where you shred skulls, and it's up close. So your first 2 out of 3 guns are up close. You have the shield, which is melee-based, parry-based, and you can also throw it. But it's still very close range-based. And then you have your Blood Punch melee, as well as a flail melee weapon, and now I'm blanking on the name of the other weapon, but it's like a club, right? So there's a lot of melee, and then you have big demons, who they will attack you from a distance, but they are shielded in ways that you can't really deal with them. And even some, there's the big, more elite demons that you can deal with from far away, but it's better up close if you're parrying and playing into a closer combat role. And so this game, unlike the last 2 games, has a big melee system. You have multiple melee weapons and not just punching, as well as also having your shield, which you can shield bash with. You can block attacks, you can parry attacks. So it's like if Doom and like a Souls-like game had a baby. And I actually found it really enjoyable. I haven't played Souls-like games. It's just, when you think Souls-like, you think very difficult. And that's just, I play a lot of Warzone and Apex, which can get sweaty. And I don't really want to sweat when I'm just playing single-player games. But that all being said, I also thought this was the easiest Doom of the modern Dooms, 2016, Eternal, and this one. I played on Hurt Me Plenty, right? It's the second difficulty on all of them. And this was by far the easiest. In fact, I barely used anything other than 2 weapons the whole time, and my shield and my flail melee, because I didn't feel like I needed the firepower of the super shotgun very often, or the rocket launcher. There's a grenade launcher in this one. I didn't feel like I need that firepower on Hurt Me Plenty. And I'm glad I stuck on Hurt Me Plenty. I thought about upping the difficulty a little bit, but I'm glad I stuck on Hurt Me Plenty so I can make this comparison. So I definitely think it's the easiest of the 3. It's the slowest moving of the 3. It's less platformy than the other 2. So it's definitely different, and I do like that they did things different here. So that way, I like that each of these 3 games have kind of a different identity. Then you also add into that different identity the mech levels, which were a lot of fun when you're in a giant mech that's like taller than buildings. You're fighting Titan-sized demons. That was really fun. And then there's levels where you're on the back of a dragon that has big robot wings and a big turret on it, and that's a lot of fun too. There's levels that blend both the mech and on the ground, and the dragon and on the ground combat, and I think that's a lot of fun too. And then the other big difference here is that there's a lot more narrative to it. One thing that made me a little thrown off from the other two Dunes was there's barely any cutscenes, there's not a lot of narrative to it. It really is just a boomer shooter, get in here, shoot demons, a lot of action type of game. And while that is enjoyable, it's not as enticing as when there's also a story to follow. I like good cinematic cutscenes, I like the narratives to follow. And this game was much more narrative. So from like a gameplay standpoint, I still think I would put Eternal 1 because I just love the actual gameplay so much, but it's hard for me to put it at 1 because the narrative parts of Doom the Dark Ages do a lot for me. I really like that it is more narrative than the other two games. The other big difference is the way the upgrade system works. You don't have to go find these upgrade robots and take an upgrade from them and upgrade your gun. But you also can't upgrade it anything else at any time. You know, upgrading the guns, upgrading the shield, the melee weapons. You can't do that at any time. You have to collect gold around the map, and that's the currency you use to upgrade. And then you go to shrines and you upgrade. Now, there's also other more advanced currencies. But the basic is you find the currencies, you find a shrine, you upgrade guns, melee, and guns, melee, and shield. And then the other big difference, sorry, that's probably gross. The other big difference being that that to upgrade your total health, your total shield, and your total ammo, you actually have to defeat stronger enemies and you rip out their heart, and then it's color associated with ammo, health, or armor, and then you like explode that heart, and then you get added to it. You can't just use upgrades like you could in the other two games that contribute to upgrading your health, your armor, and your ammo. So those are the big differences. Like I said, I would put Doom 2016 last. It's a fun game, but it has no narrative. It has no real narrative parts to it, as well as not having a lot of movement. Eternal, I think, has the more fun, interactive gameplay, more movement based, and then I really like the narrative parts of Doom: The Dark Ages. It's like 1A, 1B, and then Doom 2016, right? And so I think this is for somebody who's not coming into Doom. I think Doom: The Dark Ages is the best way to come in if you're just gonna play one Doom game. I would not come into it right away if you want to play all the Doom games, just because I think it's the most different. When you're putting the delta between them, it's more different from 2016 than Eternal is from 2016, and Eternal's more like 2016 than it is like the Dark Ages. I don't know how to really explain that, but I hope you understand what I'm thinking. And so if you're just going to play one and you're a gamer who plays a lot of games, play Doom: The Dark Ages. If you want to play things in timeline order, you do Doom: The Dark Ages 2016 and then Eternal. But that is my kind of comparison spiel and my thoughts. I don't want to give a full ranking yet because we're going to do our usual cons, so-sos, and pros. This is the longest I think I've ever taken to get to that. But I did want to address how it's different because the three games are so different. And so we're going to start with cons. And I don't have any real good cons. This is an amazing game. It was hard to find a lot of cons. So one, and this is just a funny one. The first one I wrote down was the hairy imps. The imps are hairy, and they're not fully hairy. They have like hair on their bodies in certain spots. I don't know. It was just weird looking. I thought that was a funny one because it's not really a big deal. One that is more about a hardware and other software issue is that when this game came out, NVIDIA put out a new driver, and the game pops up a pop-up that says, driver update required, but you can hit a play button to bypass, and then essentially asks you if you're sure. You hit play again, and it lets you get into the game. And so that was just frustrating. And then it would actually, while I was streaming, it would like overload my GPU, which is a 5070, by the way, or that's what's that encoding overload on OBS, because my whole PC would freeze for a second. And I think that's due to not having the drivers updated. I've never had that in any game ever, especially because I'm only a couple driver versions behind, and that was because I updated to the one that's not the most recent one, but the one right before that, and it was just bricking my 5070. Essentially, all my screens would just go black, and turning off and turning on the PC at one point wasn't working. I reverted drivers, it worked, so now I'm nervous about updating. And so that's not necessarily a con against the game. That doesn't really affect my rating of the game. Maybe if I'm gonna give it a 10 at the end, it'll be a 9.99 because of that. Because it is partially because of the game, right? Like it's it's coded into the game that it wants those drivers. But that's also an NVIDIA thing. I don't know if it's an AMD thing, so I can't really take off from that. Another small con is this UI. When you sprint, it's not really intrusive. It's very translucent, but like blue bursts out from the middle of your screen as you activate sprint, and then it has these blue streaks all around your screen while you're sprinting. But there's an auto sprint setting. And so when you have auto sprint on, I think it should turn that off, because otherwise, if you just have auto sprint on, you always have these blue streaks around unless you're moving sideways or backwards or jumping. And you kind of don't notice it, but where it really becomes a pain is it also plays in audio, and like the blue burst from the center every time your sprint starts. So if you just change directions a lot while you're in fights, it pops up a lot. If you are tripping on little stones or little details or roots or whatever, it will keep activating. And when you have auto sprint on, I wish that the UI came off. I didn't see a setting to turn it off, but I wish you could. And if you can, I need to find that. The other con, and this is a really small one too, the cons aren't good on this list, this is just such a good game, is climbing. There's the typical like scratched up walls that you can climb up, but I was gonna not climb for a second. I don't remember, itch, drink water, something. And so I wasn't pushing up on my thumbstick or W key if you're on mouse and keyboard. And I played on controller, by the way. I know Doom is one of those games that people say you should play on mouse and keyboard. And it just started climbing up. And that's just a small thing, but like there's no agency in climbing. Once you're on the climbing wall, it just climbs up. I believe you have to sprint into the wall or sprint jump into the wall for it to climb. And I'm not saying or, it's like an and or, because you don't have to jump to every climb. And you can just sprint to it. And then it just like takes you up the wall with an animation. I didn't like that you have no control over the climb. So that's the cons. Like I said, there's no real big ones there. The so-sos I have is parrying. Now, this one takes some explanation, because first of all, parrying and like melee has not really been an identity of Doom games. Yes, you've been able to punch, but that's the extent. And so for people who are like hardcore Doom purists, that's going to take away, and I'm sure those same people didn't like all the movement in Eternal, but that's a departure from the typical identity of Doom. And then also the parrying, now you can change parrying timing. But just on the regular Hurt Me Plenty difficulty, which I already said was too easy, and that actually should have been probably on the cons. But I don't really know how you classify that, because that is more opinion based than anything on this list. But you can change the parrying timing, even leaving a Hurt Me Plenty and shorten the timing. But for somebody who doesn't really, typically that's not my favorite part in games. If you notice, I don't play very many sword games or melee based games, because I'm just not a big parry person. I'm trying to get over that, because there's a lot of good games I miss out on. But the parrying was too easy for me. Now, like I said, I could adjust the difficulties, but I wanted to leave things on default Hurt Me Plenty to compare them to the other games. And the parrying was way, 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 way too easy. And the other thing that's frustrating about parrying is there's some enemies that you can really only fight mostly through parrying. And once again, that just takes away from the Doom identity. But for people that like melee combat, I do think the parrying system was good overall. It makes sure the parrying is important and you can't really ignore it in the game, and you can also change the difficulty and the timing associated with parrying. And so I think that is the best way to do a parrying system if you want it in a game, and that's why I didn't want to put on the cons either. And that's my only so. Moving on to the pros is there's more open maps. Now that once again is a kind of departure away from typical Doom formula. There is the maps are essentially one big area instead of like a kind of a linear progression with little areas you can duck into to go find hidden collectibles and stuff. This is like a mini open worlds in every single chapter, and there's 22 of them. And all of them are unique, which is nice too, but the maps are more open, which I thought was a pro. And on top of that, there's like, they call them end of mission markers when they first tell you about them, but they're essentially like gravestone shaped markers that are essentially, you can't come back from here. So it might be like jumping down towards something and it's like, hey, you don't come back from here, right? Or going up an elevator, hey, you can't come back. So it's essentially, hey, I know this is a mostly open map in areas, but you're not going to be able to come back here. So if you want to make sure you 100% each chapter and get all the collectibles, don't do this yet. And so I like that, especially with the more open maps. Then moving on to the next one, and this is such a small one, but it's a fun one. In between your health logo, you can have modern Doom guy, nothing, or you can put the classic Doom guy face with the nosebleeds and the messed up hair as you get damage, and it's just a fun little thing. Something that I've already talked about in here that I thought was a pro was the game was more narrative. Now, if you're a purist that likes the old school, that's not really great, right? Like, if you're a purist, you don't want the more narrative. You just want to boom or shoot. But I think it appeals to more gamers that way. And I I think more people want storytelling in their games than just running around and shooting demons, because you still get the running around and shooting demons. But now it's more of a story. It's more of like an interactive movie, which is like certainly something I play single player games for, right? If I didn't want that, I would play more multiplayer games or do stuff like Zombies on COD, where I'm just shooting enemies endlessly, right? The next one was, and these aren't in any great order, these are just as they popped in my head. Graphics. Graphics are really good. Now, I thought about putting this in so-sos because there's some areas where there was one fight where it got really foggy and I couldn't see anything. And then there's other areas that are just too dark. Now, you can change your brightness settings, but I followed the brightness on my screen that said not visible for a logo and barely visible. That's what I did. But I could turn it up a little bit. But I also hate like distorting colors when you turn up the brightness too much. And so the graphics are really, really good. The game's beautiful. The details are wonderful. The environments are well fleshed out detail-wise. Like, it has to be way in the distance for something to not be detailed. The cutscenes are gorgeously detailed. Gorgeous cutscenes. The graphics were really good in this game, except for those small couple little things. The next thing I have on there is the shield saw. Now, once again, this is a departure from the typical Doom formula, but the shield saw was fun. It's very involved in parrying. You have something that I actually don't have on here, but there's upgrades that come with the shield that give you more things. Like, one is lightning bolts when you parry, and there's only certain attacks you can parry. Green ones. You have to avoid the red ones or just block them with the shield. And the blocking projectiles was nice too when you get into big fights with a lot of enemies. And that's a nice part of the shield. But like, my favorite upgrade to the shield was a mini turret that's on your shoulder. And anytime you parry a projectile attack, the mini turret auto aims at whoever's like within your aim's vicinity, obviously one enemy at a time. And just being able to cut open enemies, which actually, one thing about a con on here that I didn't put on this list that everyone's talking about is there's no real glory kill executions. Now, you can jump and then do what would be the action would trigger a glory kill. And sometimes you'll get like a glory kill animation. That should have been on my cons. I mean, you do it with the shield saw, which is fun as well. And then the next pro I have on here is Mechs and Dragons. It was just, once again, if you're a Doom purist, this is not going to be on your pro list. But for somebody who's new to Doom and just enjoys gaming, I liked the mechs. The mechs were a lot of fun. Being able to run through environments, fight these big Titan demons, and then the dragon, being able to fly around maps, and you can chase down these demon ships and shoot them down. That was all a lot of fun. I really liked the mechs and the dragons in this game. And then another little fun detail in this game is limb removal. So obviously if a zombie's too weak, or not a zombie, a demon is too weak and they take a little bit of damage, they die no matter what, it's going to die. But on some bigger demons, you can shoot off their arms and then they'll just run up to you and stare at you with their arms. Because what are they going to do, right? They can't shoot you. They can't launch anything into you. They can't swipe you. And it's just a funny little fun detail. And then finally, environmental destruction. Now there's some stuff you can destroy as the Doom Slayer boots on the ground. But you can also, when you're in the mech, you can destroy like everything that is in a mountain or a huge building. Any buildings that are like smaller than you, you can destroy bridges. Just another fun thing. It's fun. I spent some time on the mech levels running around and just destroying stuff for fun. Just because, why not? Instead of moving on right away. It was just a lot of fun. I like the environmental destruction. So, all in all, a lot longer pro list than the so-sos and the cons because this game is awesome. It's a departure from the typical Doom formula with the melees, the cutscenes, not really the cutscenes, yes, the cutscenes, but the whole narrative built in this game is much more in-depth and storytelling than the previous games. And yes, the mechs and the dragons are departure, but if you're not a purist, or you are and you can just look past that to just enjoy a fun game, this is an amazing game. If you go look at the reviews, they're all like 4.5 out of 5, 4.8 out of 5, 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10, 10 out of 10. The reviews are really good, and I'm right along those lines. I have a hard time giving out 9s and up, but when you put in the context of the genre, because boomer shooter is not typically the first thing I think of with genres, right? That I want to play single player. Usually it's open world. A lot of time it's third person. This isn't. But when you just look into the genre of boomer shooter and you consider it in that context, I have to give it a 9.5 out of 10. It is my favorite of the 3 Doom games. It is my favorite of any boomer shooter type games I've ever even played a demo of. It is a blast. It is a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it. If you're just thinking as gaming as a whole or shooter games as a whole, it's a 9 out of 10, I think. Just because the boomer shooter thing, I think, is less popular these days, and it's certainly not my first choice. But boomer shooter, 9.5. I don't give games 10s unless I literally can't think of a con. So 9.5. 9.7, which I don't even like halves a lot of times. That's why I like people that do like 95 out of 100. But like 9.5 plus out of 10 in the boomer shooter genre. In general, probably a 9 out of 10. This game is fantastic. A lot of games are coming out that are getting popular these days under $70. This is worth the $70. If you haven't bought it and you're just looking for a fun game to play with a good story, go play this game. Doom: The Dark Ages is a whole lot of fun. That's my thoughts on it. If you watch the whole thing, I really appreciate it. This is one of my longer reviews, but I just had so much to say about just a wonderful game. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you like this type of content, want to see it first. And comment down below what you think of my review or Doom: The Dark Ages, the Doom franchise in general. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And like I said, I'll have Twitch linked down below. We play brand new single-player gameplay. Single-player games when they come out. Otherwise, on Sundays, we play single-player games that we have in our backlog. And all the other days, we're usually playing Apex or Warzone. And we're playing, other multiplayer games that come out, or betas, alphas that interest me. So that Twitch is linked down below, as well as all my other social medias and my single-player channel if you want to check that out. And I will also link below my Doom: The Dark Ages playlist over from my single-player channel if you want to go check that out. But I will see you in the next review. Have a good day. Bye. Holy shit. Let's see if I can shoot his other arm off. Yeah, fuck it. I'm gonna die.